You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got it. We got the local, we got the state, we got the national, sometimes the international. And I'm just telling you, we cover down on all the issues like the dude just said. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, it is the day. Hit it. Friday. It is. Congratulations. You have made it through another week, and we are, by the way, also like headed into June. Like we're sliding into June, and this is also, by the way, the onset of the Memorial Day weekend. And so I'm going to tell you right now, we're gonna make today's show something very special. I'm pretty excited about this. I am looking forward to all of y'all being a part of it, and I want you to be a part of it. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but let's just go ahead and say this is going to be a Memorial Day show unlike any you may have ever heard before, and I'm looking forward to getting it going. In the meantime, Boom Shakalaka is on the board. Hey, buddy.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm awesome, and like you said, I am excited about today's show.
How much caffeine have you had?
Not much.
Yeah, I know you had a late night and early morning. You drove out of town, drove back to town.
I know, so I'm ready to go. But yes, the show today is incredible, and I can't wait to hear all the stories and it's gonna be awesome, and I hope everybody tunes in the entire time.
Absolutely. Well, and participates too, for that matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, so what he's talking about, what I was talking about, is today is going to be a Memorial Day ode to those who have served and gone before us. All right. So, and we got a multiple callers. I mean, you're not going to believe the lineup here. It's going to be a full slate. So at 2:30, I'm pretty stoked. He's been on the show. It's been a while, but my interpreter from Afghanistan, Hamid, who is not, and by the way, we're going to stick with his first name only. I'm not going to talk about where he lives. That's just for security reasons. He still has family under the eyes of the Taliban right now. And so we're going to just say Hamid, my Afghan interpreter who I served with overseas, and I'm proud to have him back here in the United States now as a U.S. citizen. Hamid's going to be on the phone with us at 2:30, talking about his memories of serving together, things that, we have seen and done and places he's been. So yeah, 2:30, Hamid, my Afghan interpreter. 3 o'clock, Major General Joe Arbuckle. He's been on the show once before. He now works with an organization called STARS that works against wokeness in the military. But Major General Joe Arbuckle himself is also a Vietnam veteran with a career of service that transcended what many of us could ever aspire to. Major General Joe Arbuckle coming on at 3 p.m. And then at 3:30 p.m., Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mike Durant. And you all know Mike Durant. He most recently ran for the U.S. Senate. He was a top-tier candidate for the Senate. But he's also, by the way, when you hear Black Hawk Down, you often hear Mike Durant's name in the same sentence. He was the pilot of Super 6-4 that went down. And Randy Shugart and Gary Gordon, two Delta Force operators, both won the Congressional Medal of Honor by saving his life. He was also held in captivity for almost 2 weeks in Somalia. So yeah, Mike Durant will be on at 3:30. And then at 4 o'clock, it is Friday. So we'll convert the last portion of the show to kind of updating on some news and things that happened in Montgomery. And Stephanie Smith from the Alabama Policy Institute will be with us. All of that, and I still kind of got a triple dipper, so hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper. 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you have got to know. Got a little bit of difference here. So I got 3 dippers. Yes, I do. But the first one, I'm calling it Heroes Among Us. Alabama has had 33 Medal of Honor winners in its history. 33. And so what I'm going to do is take that first dipper, I'm calling it Heroes Among Us, and we're going to spread it out. In between all these phone calls I've got, I'm going to give you another citation of someone from right here, on home turf, right here in Alabama, who was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And it's an amazing thing. So the Medal of Honor being an amazing feat in and of itself. The stories, though, that come from Alabama citizens, some of them are actually legendary. So we'll talk about it. Heroes Among Us can be spread out throughout the show. Number 2, military-minded. There are several things happening, not the least of which is it looks like we're getting a new chairman for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We'll talk about all of that, plus a few other military stories that are in the mix. And then number 3 on the Triple Dipper, news roundup. So some things happened this week. It looks like we may actually see some tax relief out of Montgomery. We also saw some ridiculous things out of Montgomery. But that's all happened just in the last few days, along with a few other stories on the national level. And we'll do that with Stephanie Smith and kind of round out the day heading into the Memorial Day weekend with number 3, News Roundup. Wow, Boom. I mean, is the show over yet?
There's going to be a lot for today. It's just going to be good.
I got 10 pounds of stuff in my 5-pound bag. All right, listen, let me jump over here and do my opening monologue. And I got to say, we're entering into Memorial Day weekend. I want to stress how important it is that we always remember and never forget. And those words may sound synonymous, always remember, never forget, but they really aren't synonymous. To always remember implies that something from the back of the mind needs to be brought forward. Remember it, recall it, bring it up. To never forget means we don't let it go. This weekend is designed as a time of memory related to honor and sacrifice, and we should ensure that we as individuals and as a nation endeavor to always remember, to bring those honorable sacrifices to the front of our minds, and to never forget. To determine as a people that we will not let go of the understanding that we are made free by those sacrifices. I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. I have, and it's humbling. If you've never been to Arlington Cemetery, you ought to make it a point to do so. The fields of perfectly spaced white headstones and perfectly manicured grounds are interspersed with occasional tombs and trees. I mean, it's everything that a deceased military member should have to honor their passing. The funeral that I attended was for a Special Forces soldier. The flag-draped casket was moved to the grave site by a horse-drawn caisson. The family was gathered. A firing party delivered the rifle volley. A bugler just off in the distance played taps. The casket team folded the flag with precision, and on behalf of a grateful nation, the folded flag was presented to the next of kin. It seemed like a holy moment, like speaking above a whisper would have been disrespectful. But equally pressing and impressive is a ceremony that's held by troops at the field of battle where they've lost one of their own. I'll never forget having a friendly conversation with a young cavalry first lieutenant named Eric McRae. We sat next to each other on our fob in central Baghdad, shooting the breeze in early June during a down moment. He was a good kid from Oregon. He had married his young wife just a couple of weeks before he deployed. An all-American boy, kind of a next-door kind of a kid that was 25 years old. The day after our visit, he was gone. June 4th, next week, just over a week from now, will mark 19 years to the day that Eric McRae and specialists Justin Irely and Justin Linden were killed in a coordinated attack in central Baghdad by a combination of IED strikes and small arms fire. And the ceremony I was talking about was held soon thereafter right there on the fob, marked by having their boots on a pedestal, in front of their rifles with bayonets fixed and pointed down, with their dog tags hanging from the pistol grips, and their helmets, or in McRae's case, his cavalry Stetson, sitting on top. And we honored them. We honored who they were, but we also honored and remembered what they did and why they did it. Honor can be coupled with memorial. It's a reasonable combination of things, honor and memorial, especially given the sacrifices that we built this nation upon. So Arlington and other cemeteries throughout America, those are where the accounts are kept. Those are where we keep the ledger of what it takes to be a free nation. Freedom is not something to be taken lightly. Freedom is far too often just that kind of somewhat esoteric thing that seems nebulous or ethereal, like you can almost touch it but not quite, but the day you don't have it, you are suddenly keenly aware of it. Too easily taken for granted, too easily forgotten, but never easily gained. Never easily gained. Freedom, in fact, is the most expensive commodity known to man. More than any precious metal or earthly possession, freedom is that thing that should equate to the same level as air and water and food as one of the essentials of life. And it is costly because it is paid for by the blood and the sweat and the labor of men and women. And it's constantly refreshed and kept viable by nearly every generation. You may have heard me say I asked my father once if he ever thought that I would go to war, and I always remember his response. He said, "Son, there's never been an American generation without a war." It's just a fact. And this Memorial Day, it is important that we pause in the midst of our time off, cooking hot dogs on the grill, hanging out by the lake, or just enjoying a day away from our usual routines, and take stock of the reason why the day exists and those it was designed to honor. What we now call Memorial Day was originally called Decoration Day. It became officially acknowledged as an event in May of 1868 to honor the war dead from the Civil War. General John Logan proclaimed it in his General Order No. 11, saying, Quote, the 30th of May, 1868 is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city and village and hamlet church in the land. On that first official decoration day, 5,000 participants decorated the graves of thousands of soldiers who were buried at Arlington Cemetery. And then Congressman and future President James Garfield gave a speech to the crowd in which he said, quote, I am oppressed with a sense of impropriety of uttering words on this occasion, he added. If silence is ever golden, it must be here beside the graves of 15,000 men whose lives were more significant than speech and whose death was a poem, the music of which can never be sung. Well, it grew from there, Decoration Day did. In the early 1900s, the graves of World War I veterans were added to the Decoration Day. And with each war, as the cost of freedom was refinanced again and again, more and more graves became a part of the solemn celebration. In 1971, Congress passed the National Holiday Act, and the last day of May officially became Memorial Day. And Ronald Reagan gave a speech at Arlington on Memorial Day in 1982. He said this, he said, quote, the United States and the freedom for which it stands, the freedom for which they died, must endure and prosper. Their lives remind us that freedom is not bought cheaply. It has a cost. It imposes a burden. And just as they whom we commemorate were willing to sacrifice, so too must we, in a less final, less heroic way, be willing to give of ourselves. So my hope is that this weekend you will have a wonderful time with family and friends. Perhaps get a little rest, sleep a little later than usual, eat some hot dogs, have a beer, but somewhere in there, take a second and pause and remember why you have that day off. Tell your kids and your grandkids. Even if you don't have a military connection in your own life, it does not mean for a second that you cannot appreciate the freedom, the actual freedom that you enjoy here in the greatest nation on the earth. So remind yourself that freedom is not free, and that men and women have gone before us to ensure that freedom remains dynamic and not static. And if you served yourself, well, then remember your brothers in arms who served with you. And for those who didn't come home, do them the honor of being intentional to always remember and never forget. And that's a wrap for the Rightside Way. Well, it's going to be a show like that, man. And I'll tell you, there might be some laughter mixed in, but there's going to be memories and there's going to be thoughts. And I just want to encourage all of y'all. Always remember and never forget. And if you want to call the show or text the show and give us the names or the brief, memory you have of someone who's gone before us, do that. Honor them. I will take it, and we'll read all the ones we can and take all the calls we can. In the meantime, y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right, covering down on some major ground as we bring truth and justice to the people of Alabama. I'm just saying, solid conservative and just plain right. And I tell you what, I'm going to go to the text messages real quick. So text lines are open, 833-687-4448. Love your thoughts on Memorial Day. If there's someone in particular you want to honor by saying their name and whether they served with you or around you or something, you just throw that in there. Could be a family member or whatever. I'd love to hear it. I would, let's see, what have I got here? Brian from Huntsville says, Colonel and Boomer, I bid a peaceful and somber Memorial Day to all those left behind as their loved ones gave their life for us, battlefields and motor pools and everyone. Every one of you served and you're still serving. Thank you. And he says, as the caissons go rolling along. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your service, too. Gray Falcon from Ardmore says, I would encourage everyone who is not to find out the video of John Chapman. Okay, there's that. Stephen from Madison regarding my monologue says, amen, my friend. Well said. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Donna from Hartselle, if my text messages would reboot, that would be nice. Hang on a second. It's rekindling. Tell you what, while it's doing that, Boomer, I was going to ask you, your granddaddy, was in the Army. Wasn't he in Berlin?
Mm-hmm. He was. He was in Berlin, and man, I remember just hearing stories, just from the way he served and stuff. He was in also the Army band.
Oh yeah, that's right. Didn't
Yeah.
he play for Eisenhower or something one
He did.
time?
He played for Eisenhower.
That's actually very cool.
And just honor him. He actually passed away this year.
Yeah,
this past year.
Yeah, y'all just lost him recently. Yeah, yeah. Oh, a neat man too, by the way. I was proud to know him. But yeah, great service. And that was a Cold War Berlin. That was East-West Berlin. That was not. That was the days when it was the wall was up and it was a weird time.
Right, and I would love to honor his name too, Wilfred May.
There you go,
Yep.
Wilfred May. All right. Good stuff, man. Okay, my text messages have rebooted. Donna from Hartselle texted in and said, that was a wonderful opening. Please write that down and send that out to every newspaper across the country so people will always remember what's important on Memorial Day weekend. Well, Donna, I appreciate that. Thank you, my friend. For those who don't know, by the way, I do write a piece. Usually I take at least one of my monologues from the week and I convert it into something that is sent out to newspapers all over the state. It usually comes up on 1819 News every Monday morning. But I believe that one, the one I just did, is the one that I'm sending out this time. I'll be converting it into a written piece. And Donna, thank you. I'm honored by that. But yeah, there's about 18 papers around the state that publish it over the next week or so. Raven from Russellville. Colonel, I still can't hear taps without shedding tears. Honor to all those who made the ultimate sacrifice and prayers for their families. May we always honor their memories. Thank you, Raven. Thank you for your service too, man. John from Huntsville says, Phil, happy Memorial Day. Honor the fallen, thank the living, and thank you for your service. Thank you, John. Appreciate you, man. Brand new in the text line, Shannon Barker from, I said her last name, boom. Shannon from Rainbow City. I know Shannon. Shannon, glad you're in the list, and thanks for joining up with the text strings. Okay, Matt from Athens has got two he's honoring. Staff Sergeant Richard Ramey, U.S. Army, 703rd EOD, killed in action in 8 February of 2004. Right outside of Mahmadiyah, Iraq. That's interesting. I was there at that time. How about that? Killed while attempting to render safe an IED. And then Staff Sergeant Kim Volz, U.S. Army, also 703rd EOD, killed in action 14 December 2003, died of wounds sustained attempting to render safe an IED outside of Iskandariyah, Iraq. Matt from Athens, thanks for sending it in, buddy. We honor their service. All right, well, so listen, we got a lot of stuff laid on this show. There's going to be some great calls. Again, coming up in the next few minutes, my interpreter, Hamid, from Afghanistan, and we're going to keep his last name and where he's located right now off the air. But my friend Hamid served with me in the beginning of the war, and I'm just going to get his perspective on what it means to, now be a U.S. citizen and consider Memorial Day, and also talk to him about what's going on in Afghanistan and how his family's doing. That's coming up here in just a few minutes. 3 o'clock, top of the hour, Major General Joe Arbuckle, 30-year career, retired as a 2-star. Service in Vietnam and all the way forward through the time of Desert Storm, I believe. But anyway, we'll be talking with Major General Joe Arbuckle at 3 o'clock. And then 3:30, Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mike Durant. The whole story of Black Hawk Down in many ways revolved around his Super 6-4 Black Hawk being shot down and the heroics that surrounded trying to get him out. And then 4 p.m., Stephanie Smith, Alabama Policy Institute. We got a full slate, man. There ain't no show like this one. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. That would be Alabama. I'm talking about this show sends its signal way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, even Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. Well, this is the show we're doing. The whole show, the whole first 2 hours at the very least, are dedicated to the Memorial Day, the idea that we remember, and as I said earlier, always remember and never forget those who have gone before us to make freedom a possibility for us. And somebody who I served with and was proud to be a part of a team with in Afghanistan, at the time, at the beginning of the war, this young 17-year-old kid is the one who made things work for my team. I mean, we didn't know what was being said half the time, and my buddy Hamid did. Hamid became a part of our team. He lived with us, and after we left, he went on to serve with other special operations teams, and he is now a U.S. citizen, living here with his beautiful family in the United States. And just for safety's sake, because he still has family back in Afghanistan, we're just going to use his first name and not talk about where he lives now. But he's on the phone right now. So, Hamid, my brother, how are you doing?
Good. How have you been?
I am good, man. I am just doing fine. Is your family well?
Yes, everyone is well.
Well,
we're all fine.
Well, good deal. Hey, listen, thanks for making some time for us today. Let me ask you this. So we were one of the first teams you worked with in Afghanistan, and you were like 17 years old, and then you went on to work with other teams. What do you have any distinct memories, and how did it come to be that you even learned English with the Taliban being in charge?
Absolutely. I was a 17-year-old kid, as you said, and I had gone through a period of lack of food during the Taliban and the civil war that was happening. So when I first came across all the food and the MREs and cupcakes, Tabasco sauce, oranges with no seeds, I just found that to be. I remember for the first time I had oranges that were sent to troops, and I was so shocked that they did not have seeds. And I was like, one day when I make it in life, I will be having these every day. And I do have one a day now.
Well,
so those are like some of the very visceral memories. And of course, started when I started working with troops. It was an honor, and it was a great experience, and I learned so much. And there were many people who I looked up to as role models, and you were one of them, truly.
Well, I'm honored by that. Thank you, brother. You know, at the time, what was interesting to me was we came to a point where we realized that things could happen in the middle of the night, and so we asked you if you would just come live with the team. I mean, you didn't go home at night. You didn't have to go back to, where your family was. You actually lived with us, became a part of, who we were as a team. And there you were, 17, 18 years old, carrying an AK-47 and going out on patrol with us when we did. And you did a great job.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I had good leadership. And thank you so much for taking me and trusting me during those days and guiding me and giving me the proper instructions to do my job.
Well, you could have. The interesting thing is, we didn't know Dari, and you could have said anything, and we would have had to say okay. But you the reason why you lived with us because we trusted you. But that was one of the unique things about it was in the space that we were operating, trust was absolutely imperative, and at the same time, there were people that you and I both knew. Afghans who have been under threat of death, and you actually had to come to the United States. You first were a refugee because your family had faced threats. And if you don't mind, just briefly talk about what the sacrifices were for you to even leave the country and become a refugee.
So the biggest sacrifice for me has been, I have in the city where I live right now, I have a friend here who was working for the sheriff's department, and he grew up here from childhood until now. And he's in his 50s now, and sometimes we go around and he shows me where he grew up and where his first house was and all that. And that's one of the things that I think I miss the most, is that I lost the very city that I was born in, and I have no hope at this point to go back in the very streets and in the very town and the street food. And so that was the biggest sacrifice. And more than that, of course, when American troops came to Afghanistan, they made many friends, and then they made many local allies. And seeing some of those allies left behind, some of them lost their lives. And to carry those memories with me to this day is very sad. And of course, I'm very happy for the folks that made it back. And also, I cannot forget the folks that didn't make it, the folks that lost their lives. There was this one, when you first told me about coming on the show and the Memorial Day and who I think of. One of the guys, I'm sure you remember him, his name was Nangyalai, and he came to my mind. Nangyalai was the Guards commander cousin, actually.
Yeah.
And he was captured by the Taliban, and not only they beat him up first, after they killed him, they cut his nose and cut his lips. And I still remember that.
Wow. Well, and these folks, and I'll say this, Hamid, you're my first caller today. I have several calls today from people who have distinct service. But I thought it was important to have you on too, because I think we need to convey that sometimes who we serve with, whether they're Americans or not, that they're still part of what brings freedom, and they're still part of the fight that we have to maintain freedom. Now,
absolutely.
Listen, brother, you've got an amazing testimony. I mean, I have told your story to so many people, and I'll just brag on you just for a minute. You came here with literally nothing. You've not only it made your way through the education system and got your degree. You went on to have a master's from Yale. You went back and worked for a period of time for the president of Afghanistan. And I think it's an amazing story. To me, it's the American dream. And there was a time you called me one time, and you said, I have paid off all of my student loans. And I said, how did you do that? You had a lot of student loans. And your response to me was amazing. You said, this country has given me so much, I don't want to have to owe it. And so I guess I ask you now, as an American citizen, how does Memorial Day fit into your thinking, and what are your thoughts on that?
When I first came to this country back in 2006, and I could literally feel the peace and how calm and how orderly everything was and still is. And I also looked around and saw that how people were taking it all for granted. Nobody talks about peace. Nobody talks about we don't have security issues. We are not being attacked and so on our soil. And I was like, it's unbelievable that everybody is taking this for granted, not knowing that the men and women who are fighting far away for this peace is something that nobody really thinks about much. And to me, I literally said to myself, this peace has a huge cost that people are paying for. So I feel that to this day, this freedom, this peace that we have here, the fact that you can just send your kids to school and you don't have to worry that they will be kidnapped or a bomb will blow up and kill them, is an amazing gift. It's an amazing aspect of life to cherish. And of course, it's people who served, it's people who lost their lives that have made this possible. And we shouldn't forget them, and we shouldn't forget their families. And I must add, we shouldn't forget that the very people who are serving right now, and they are willing to lay their life if time comes, we shouldn't forget them, and we should cherish them while they're alive, just as we cherish those who have lost their lives for this country. And we should cherish their memories and help their families and their children.
That is so well said, and I think you bring a perspective, brother. I think you do. I think you bring a perspective that so many of us here who have lived a sheltered life, sometimes even those who have served in hard places, don't have that base of or that perception that you have from having seen without and now seeing what you can have with freedom. And let me ask you this, just in the couple minutes we have left together, how are your parents doing? I know your dad served in the Afghan National Army. He was a career officer, but my understanding is it's been a bit difficult for them because they are still over there under Taliban rule now. How are your folks doing?
They're doing okay. For my father, it's very difficult, of course, because he served in the Afghan military for 40 years total, and he worked very hard in hoping that one day he will retire and he will receive his retirement and live on that. Now that the entire military and everything collapsed and this barbaric regime came to power, he lost that. He couldn't really enjoy the fruits of his 40 years of work. And he's not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of people who work for the Afghan government, worked alongside the U.S. government to bring freedom and democracy. And then at the end, we all know what happened. And it's difficult for them. It's difficult.
Well, you got your sister over here most recently, didn't you?
Yes, she came here. And it was a very happy moment. She finally made it. So that's definitely a plus in my life. And also to see all these Afghan families that have been granted the right to come to the United States because of their service, and to see them and to see their children, and to see Afghan children going to school just like normal kids. It's amazing. It's a great scene.
Well, my brother, I love you. I appreciate your service, and I just want to get your perspective as we get into this show. But I really appreciate you making the time for us today and calling in. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so
I'll talk
much.
to you soon. All right, that was Hamid. He and I worked together, and like I said, I'm keeping his last name and his location off the air. I just feel like it's safer that way. Like I said, he still has family in harm's way right now. But man, I'm telling you, when you don't have the frame of reference of what it means to live without freedom, wow. But you're listening to a guy there who grew up with nothing, who was amazed. Did you hear what he said earlier on? One of his earlier memories was when the U.S. troops came, he was amazed by seedless oranges. Can you imagine? That's what stands out in his mind. I mean, the things that we have here, we take for granted. And he comes from a place where freedom was not available to now living here and having kids that are, going to school. And it's just, anyway, it's been something to watch him grab hold of the American dream. And I remember him being so proud when he got his citizenship. And so anyway, my brother Hamid, and we'll talk more. We get back from this break. Coming up top of the hour, Major General Joe Arbuckle will be on to provide some of his own perspective about his years of service and people he served with. And by the way, he was an advisor to the South Vietnamese Army early in his career. So he worked directly with folks from a different uniform, but just as much in harm's way. All right, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Yeah, that was cool having Hamid on the show. That was.
Yes.
I mean, the guy is just. I mean, he's got the. There needs to be a book written about his life. But I'm serious, man. We did some crazy stuff together, and this 17-year-old kid toting a AK-47. I don't know if he knew how to use it, but he was with us, and we used to sit down and talk, and he would ask questions about America, like, I've heard this, and what about that, and
Wow.
it was just funny. It was cool. Got some great texts in there. New in the text string, Mindy from Birmingham says, "Good afternoon, Phil. I do enjoy your show. Thank you for your military service." He said, "My dad." This is Mindy. Says, "My dad, Walter McGahee, served in the Korean War. He loved our great country." And she goes on to say that, and thank you for your compliments there, Mindy. She says that her dad and countless other brave soldiers, we wouldn't have the freedom we have today. And she loved the opening monologue, says it was over the top. So, Mindy, glad you're in the text string. Glad you're in the audience. Thank you so much. Dave from Killen says, "Sir, Dave from Killen here. I'm a retired Navy after 25 years. Loved your opening. Thank you for your service, Dave." Says, "I always remember my friend, Chief Robert Seeds, that died in 1996 on board the USS Nimitz. He was returning from deployment, I think in the Indian Ocean, if I'm not mistaken, what he's got an acronym there. There were 30 days out when an aircraft got trapped and the arresting cable snapped and hit him." So anyway, Dave, thanks, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for your service, and we appreciate having you in the audience. Our buddy Rayson from Hawaii is on there saying, "Honoring all who gave all to the Gold Star and to the Gold Star families." And also his own father, U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Alvin Sakagawa, frogman in Vietnam. Man, God bless those frogmen, man. Those guys were hard as woodpecker lips. Rayson, we love you, man. We're glad you're in the audience. Anyway, let me do this. So what I'm going to do between breaks is I said that my first dipper is called Heroes Among Us. So Alabama has had 33 Medal of Honor recipients. 33. We've been a state since 1819. Now, keep in mind, some of the states may have more, and that's because as a southern state during the Confederates, when the Confederates, what am I trying to say? During the Civil War, Confederate soldiers were not given the Medal of Honor, recognized by the Union. So there are some states that have multiple from the Civil War. There won't be any from Alabama, but we have a bunch nonetheless, and some of them are amazing. Like I look at some of these, I'm thinking, I had no idea. I had no idea. The first one that grabbed my attention is a guy named Robert Howard. And I've had a chance to meet several of them, like Colonel Thorsness. I've met him. Benny Adkins, I had a chance to meet him. Colonel Olalee Mize, had a chance to meet him. He was very important to me. Robert L. Howard from Opelika. Get this. Robert L. Howard was the most highly decorated officer of the Vietnam War, Medal of Honor recipient. He was wounded 14 times in 54 months of combat. That's over 4 years. That's 4.5 tours in Vietnam. The man was awarded the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, 4 Bronze Stars, and 8 Purple Hearts. For the love. He was nominated for the Medal of Honor actually 3 times over one 13-month period, but he received lesser medals for the first 2. That's how he got the Distinguished Service Cross and the Silver Star. Those actions were performed in Cambodia, where he was fighting covertly as a part of what was known as Mac V. SOG, because he was a Green Beret. He retired from the U.S. Army after 36 years as a full colonel, one of the most decorated soldiers in the Vietnam War and one of the most decorated service members in the history of the United States. He enlisted in the Army from Montgomery, Alabama, although he grew up in Opelika. Retired as a colonel in Special Forces. He has been featured in multiple books, and he was a ranger training instructor at both the mountain phase and the swamp phase. I'm just saying, this guy, you talk about hard as woodpecker lips, I'm pretty sure that one classifies as a new category. He also had 2 master's degrees. And there are now at Camp McCall, North Carolina, where they train Special Forces, there is a building named in his honor. So yeah, Robert L. Howard, Medal of Honor, 8 Purple Hearts, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, 4 Bronze Stars, Opelika, Alabama. All right, folks, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with Major General Joe Arbuckle.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national, covering down on all the issues. And like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. We're about to go to the phone, but I want to do honor to some of the folks that are texting in real quick. And I'll just say, first of all, Sean from Owens Crossroads, man, thanks for your service. And he gave me a list that I can't get through all of these right now, Sean. But I want to honor. He says, well, most of the men on this list I only vaguely knew. There are a few on here who are very close to me, as close as brothers. I miss them all, and may God Himself bless their families with comfort in this Remembrance Weekend. And he puts it at the bottom, Fallujah, 2004. Semper Fi, Sean. Thanks for your service. All right. Well, this whole first 2 hours of the show was dedicated to the memory of those who went before us. And coming on the air with us right now, Major General retired Joe Arbuckle, who has been on the show once before. He's an active member of an organization called STARS. It stands for Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Service. Basically, they're pushing back against woke in the military. But Major General Arbuckle himself had a stellar career. Retired in the year 2000 after having enlisted first in 1969. He went to Officer Candidate School, became a combat engineer, then deployed to Vietnam as an infantry advisor with Team 22 with the South Vietnamese Army, which, by the way, is who my dad served with on his first tour. He went to the Ordnance Missile System training, spent most of his career in the missile field, wound up being at Redstone Arsenal at some point, at the same time that my grandfather was post commander there, so a lot of tie-ins. Spent a lot of his time, too, focusing on national-level strategy and logistics at high levels. Retired with the rank of 2-star. His awards and decorations include, among others, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Bronze Star for Valor with 2 Oak Leaf clusters, 6 Legions of Merit, the Combat Infantryman's Badge, and the Army Parachutist Badge. And Major General Arbuckle, thanks for making time again today. How are you, sir?
Doing great, sir. Nice to be with you, and thanks for dedicating so much time to Memorial Day and Remembrance.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. And you've heard me mention before, and you and I texted back and forth, too. There's been a lot of time in my family just watching it as growing up, aside from the fact that I serve now, and I still have a son on active duty as we speak. But that being said, sir, I guess one of the things that really strikes me is I think you form tight bonds with people you serve with in uniform. I think sometimes so much quicker, maybe even so much deeper than you do elsewhere in life. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no question about that in my mind, Phil. And so that raises the question, why is that? And a couple of thoughts on that. The reason is I think that we all share some noble values, duty and honor, country, integrity, selfless service, sacrifice. And so all that stacks up to be a profession of arms. And it truly is a calling. It's not really a job. It's a calling. And for those reasons, I believe these bonds form so quickly.
Well, and I agree. And I think they last. I mean, one thing I've noticed is when you serve with someone, you can be gone and not be around them for a long period of time, get back together. It's like you never left off sometimes.
That's exactly right. And that's happened to me many, many times throughout my career. It's we just pick up the pieces right where they were when we departed the last time, and it comes together quickly. And those bonds, as you know, are even stronger when they're formed in combat because our very lives are at stake. We have to have total trust and confidence in each other in combat, and that has to happen near instantaneously in some cases. And those bonds are never broken, and that's the reason I think that you see a lot of veterans who have had combat experience only talking about that among themselves when they gather at various veterans organizations or wherever it may be, because they just feel like that they're not able to share those experiences and those bonds with civilians simply because they haven't been there and done that. It's something very, very unique. And you recall that great TV series, A Band of Brothers. That really exemplified, I think, what we're talking about here.
Well, and I agree. And hey, sir, right before you came on, too, I had my interpreter from Afghanistan, who I served with at the beginning of the war. He's now a U.S. citizen, and he was on the show, and he talked about what it felt like to come to the United States, but also the memories that he had and the people who went in harm's way and even were killed by the Taliban. So one of the things that I wanted to portray with that was that while we serve in the ranks with men and women of our own nation, there are times when we're side by side with people of a foreign nation, and the bonds mean just as much. You were an advisor with Team 22, working with the 22nd ARVN Division as a South Vietnamese advisor during your tour in Vietnam. How was that, working with foreign nations under fire?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because that's very, very important. I'll expand on it a little bit to put it in perspective, but it won't take a lot of time. I deployed, as you mentioned, to Vietnam in early January 72. At that point, just all the U.S. combat forces had been withdrawn, either deployed back to the States or in the process. So the only people left in the field actively engaging in fighting were us advisors. And we were few and far between because at that point, advisor strength had been drawn down also radically from what it was earlier in the war. And oftentimes we found ourselves out there with 2 or 3 other Americans attached to a South Vietnamese, in my case, Army unit, in some cases, Marine Corps units. And so we worked hand in glove. We ate, slept, fought with, and depended upon each other day in and day out in combat. And for me, it got particularly intense because on 31 March in 1972, the largest offensive of the war was launched by the North Vietnamese against the South. They had planned this for years. They were waiting for the U.S. forces to get out of country, leaving just us advisors. And so they came across the border, 120,000 strong, North Vietnamese with tanks, artillery, etc. And their objective was to take the country, and they darn near did. In about 3 weeks, we had some advisors on our team killed and a lot more wounded. And it pushed the South Vietnamese division I was with clear back almost to the coast. And then we went on a counteroffensive. So the point is, we fought a major offensive during that period of time, became very close with our counterparts. And the hardest thing about that relationship and those bonds, Phil, was as the year ended in the fall of 72, the word was getting out that we were being pulled out. Advisors were being pulled out. And our South Vietnamese counterparts were asking us, they would say, "You're not really leaving us here, are you?" And we had to look them in the eye and say, "Yes, we're going to leave you. You've got to get ready. You got to be able to fight on your own." And we just felt like we were deserting them, frankly. And that was one of the hardest things I've had to do.
Well, and it's a shame, and not to be too melodramatic about it, but the reality is we did that to the Kurds after the first Gulf War, and then we had the Joe Biden pullout most recently from Afghanistan, which was soul crushing for me, to be honest with you, because I was there at the beginning of the war, watching people wake up to the idea of freedom, and then to see it being snatched away just overnight almost in the tail end of that pullout.
Exactly, and that was purely a political decision, as you know, made by Joe Biden. He put a date on the wall there, a calendar date, and said we're going to pull out with that date, and there was no military reason to do that. And to my knowledge, it's the only time that a president has knowingly abandoned American citizens on a battlefield in the hands of a brutal enemy, not to mention our allies.
Well, sir, in today's Army, I mean, you're part of an organization right now that's doing all it can to push back on liberal policies and wokeness, if you will, in the ranks. Your organization stars. We talked about it before on the air. But let me ask you this: Do you feel like the current generation, and I've, like I said, I've got a son on active duty, so I have perspective on this. But do you feel like the current generation gets it in terms of Memorial Day's intent, like those generations of us who have served in uniform before, how we got it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough question. I think the answer remains to be seen. You're really asking, can the current generation feel the same and step up to the plate at some time, like those who have been killed in defense of our country did? I don't know, because you look at these factors like this. Our values are under assault. Our traditional American values are under assault from the Marxist left. Pledge of Allegiance and voluntary prayer is no longer allowed in school. Our flag, and our national anthem are being disrespected at sports games. Patriotism is being called by some from the far left as extremist. Even simple words like "Make America Great Again," not being tied with any political candidate, but just those words, are being called extremist. History is being rewritten. Project 1619. Statues are being torn down. Military installations' names have been changed. The point there is our values are changing now. That's going to influence the younger generation. So what's that going to do about recruiting? About 80% of recruits now come from military families, just like your son. And you came into the military. Your dad was in the military, as you said. That's a great trend, but if the trust and confidence in our military as an institution continues to erode the way that it's been doing in the last 3 or 4 years, people are not going to be as reluctant to recommend their family members coming into the military. So, it's not a pretty picture, and what we need to do is pray that our traditional values that have held this country strong and gave birth to those that have died in defending our liberties, our freedom, those are going to prevail. We have to pray for those to be reinstituted in our country.
Well, I completely agree. And I think that there have been times when we had wake-up calls. 9/11 was certainly a wake-up call, and national-level patriotism surged like it had not in decades. And I hope I would love to believe it doesn't take another jolt or wake-up call like that to do it. I see my own son, and I talk to him, and I know where he stands. I know what he would do. I mean, and I feel confident in that, and I feel like there's good folks in uniform. But you're right, societal values still have to give us a base from which to recruit. And I think I'm more concerned about those who are considered non-recruitable, or for that matter, don't want to be recruited, as not being available should the call come. That's where I think the issue is. I think we got some great young troops in uniform right now, and I'm just praying that we can get some leadership for them here sometime soon.
Yeah, exactly. We do have great young troops in uniform, and the leadership is the problem. And as we've talked about before, it comes from the very top, the 4-star level. And, of course, that emanates really from the Commander-in-Chief, the President, with what we're calling the wokeness happening throughout our military today and the values that represents, which are counter to our traditional American values.
Well, sir, we're winding up our time together here on the phone, and I appreciate you making some time for us. Anybody in particular you want to call out in memoriam and just make mention of having served with them or that they've gone before you?
I'll just call out one. One of the advisors during that Easter offensive I mentioned was Lieutenant Colonel Brownlee, and he's still listed as missing in action, officially on the rolls, but obviously he's dead. But he was one that we left behind, and that's as hard as having those killed in combat.
Well, Major General Joe Arbuckle, thank you for your career, your service, your duties as a high-ranking officer, and all the way back to your time even enlisting and then heading to war. We appreciate what you've done and appreciate you still being in the fight, sir.
Well, thanks a lot, Colonel Phil. Thank you for all the great things you're doing, and you keep up the fight also.
All right.
We got to defend this Constitution.
Roger that. Rangers lead the way. You have a great day, sir.
Well, you too. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's just cool. And listen, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll come right back. I've got another round of text messages, and I'm going to try and get some of them and head down that list of Alabama's Medal of Honor winners. And then coming up at the bottom of the hour, 3:30, should be getting a call from Mike Durant, Black Hawk Down. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. I'm saying where common sense is a superpower, but we're moving the show right along here, and it feels like it's flying by. Boom! I mean, how could it be 3:30 already?
I know.
It's just like, good gosh. But listen, the whole first couple hours of the show is dedicated to the idea that this is Memorial Day weekend, and I appreciate all of y'all that are texting in. I got several right now. Let me just jump on them real quick before I lose time. Paul from Huntsville. Charlie Company, first of the 167th, and Bravo Company, first of the 187th, 101st Rakasans, 2001, 2002 vet. Love this content. Listen, brother, I am so glad to hear you are a Rakasan. I got on the ground in Afghanistan when you were probably staging out of Bagram. So anyway, appreciate you. Thanks for your service, Paul. Tony from Piedmont, just my opinion, he says the good Afghans were better people than the good Iraqis. Okay, I get it. Maybe so. But I knew good ones in both. Kenny from Elkmont says, to all my USMC brothers who gave the ultimate sacrifice and their families, Semper Fidelis. Yes, sir. Dave from Killen, just texting in about folks that he was deployed with, and we just said thank you. And Dave, we're glad you're in the system with us. JT from Lacey Springs, remembering H.D. Hamilton, part of the latter days of D-Day, who would never take the family camping due to camping nightly across France for most of a year. How about that? He came home, I guess he'd already done all the camping he wanted to do at that point. Listen, you want to text in somebody you want to honor? Like, for instance, I'm going to go ahead right now and honor my dad, retired Lieutenant Colonel Philip W. Williams Sr., and then my own grandfather, retired Brigadier General George McBride. And I'm proud of their service, and they have given me a good name. Looking at heroes, I said that number one on the Triple Dipper is Heroes Among Us, but I was going to mix it in throughout the show. Let me grab another one. Leo Thorsness, Colonel Leo Thorsness. Some of y'all may know Colonel Thorsness personally. He enlisted in the Air Force in 1951 when he was 19 years old, went on to become an officer, became a fighter pilot, went to Vietnam in 1966. And on April 19th, 1967, he flew a mission for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor. It was his 92nd mission, and he was flying a specially modified F-105, which is known as a Wild Weasel. He was tasked with finding and destroying surface-to-air missiles. His wingman was shot down during that mission, and 2 crew members bailed out. But despite the fact that he was running low on fuel, Thorsness and his own electronic warfare officer, a guy named Captain Harold Johnson, they returned to the site and fended off enemy fighters while the crew parachuted to the ground. And Thorsness shot down one of the MiGs that was trying to aim at his parachuting crew members and fended off several others. His mission was actually featured in a History Channel show called Dogfights. I saw that. 10 days after that Medal of Honor mission, April 30th, 1967, Thorsness and Johnson were shot down over North Vietnam, and he spent the next several years being tortured in the Hanoi Hilton. He was 7 missions away from completing his tour. He did come home. He was liberated eventually, and Colonel Thorsness received the Medal of Honor from President Nixon in 1973, right here in Alabama. All right, we got plenty more on tap, and listen, coming up here in the next few minutes, we're going to have retired Chief Warrant Officer 4 Mike Durant. Is a resident of Madison County, and most recently ran for the U.S. Senate. But he's also known to most of us for his time, behind the stick, flying Blackhawks, to include the Battle of Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Syndicated across the entire northern half of the great state of Alabama. I'm talking about we cover down on some ground, and when our show goes way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. Well, listen, we've had an amazing show so far. The entire first 2 hours of the show are dedicated to the fact that this is Memorial Day weekend and what it means to remember. And I said earlier, to always remember and to never forget, which can be a little different. I mean, you're remembering things, you're drawing them up in your mind, but you're never forgetting, which means you're intentional about memorializing them. And someone who knows greatly what it means to be in the service and harm's way is our next guest, Mike Durant. CW4 Mike Durant, Chief Warrant Officer 4. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1979. First went to becoming a Spanish language trained Spanish voice intercept operator down in Panama. Became a pilot candidate in 1983 at Fort Rucker. Transitioned to Blackhawks. Went first to the 101st Aviation Battalion after flying medevacs for a number of years in Korea, and then joined the what was then the newly formed 160th Special Operations Group, the Night Stalkers. He flew combat operations for Prime Chance in the Persian Gulf, Just Cause, the Panama Invasion, Desert Storm, Gothic Serpent, which was Somalia in 1993, because in 1993, as we all know, what has become known as Black Hawk Down or the Battle of Mogadishu occurred. He was the pilot of Super 6-4. Shot down by an RPG, held captive for 11 days, and a number of things occurred in and around that battle. Mike Durant earned the Distinguished Service Medal, the Distinguished Flying Cross with the Oak Leaf Cluster, the Bronze Star for Valor, the Purple Heart, among others. He's also the best-selling author of a book called In the Company of Heroes, which I highly recommend. And I'm glad he's on the air after that long introduction. Mike Durant, how you doing?
Doing great, Phil. It's great talking to you again.
Well, thanks for making some time. I know you've been traveling a bit here lately, but we appreciate you making some time for us today. Listen, man, like I texted you, we've been focusing on Memorial Day today, and just wanted to get your perspective. I mean, my thoughts are that sometimes the bonds we form in uniform are tighter and developed quicker than they are anywhere else in life. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, I've said it many times. When you are put in adverse situations with people, first of all, it exposes your true identity. And, you know, once you know you can trust your buddies, your comrades, whatever you want to call them, to your left and right with your life, I mean, that creates a relationship that just doesn't exist anywhere else. And they are brothers. I mean, the word brothers is absolutely appropriate. Well,
and you certainly had some experiences, and I mean, first thing that comes to my mind is just to ask you on a Memorial Day, Shugart and Gordon. I mean, Randy Shugart, Gary Gordon, I believe it was, and they were right there in the thick with you. Talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I wouldn't be here today if not for their actions. There's just no question about it. And they both were posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I didn't know this until recently, but it's the only time in history that the medal has been awarded to two soldiers or sailors, airmen, or Marines simultaneously for the same act. It was interesting. When I went, there's a Medal of Honor Heritage Center in Chattanooga, actually, that has all the history of the award. And anyway, I've been working with them about it, actually having a dedicated exhibit to Randy and Gary that'll open next year. So, and absolutely well-deserved. I mean, I said it in my citation, and I've said it over and over. I've never seen a more courageous act. I mean, they were in a helicopter overhead. We had been shot down. I was injured, so I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of the aircraft. And they requested permission to come in. And initially we're told no, because the leadership was down to scant resources at that point and wasn't sure, where the priority needed to be. It's not like we write people off, but if you've got a good chance of saving, this group over here and you've got two guys left, that's where those guys need to go. It's triage, basically, if you're familiar with that term, and I'm sure you are.
Oh, yeah.
And they were told no, and I think for most people, that would have been the end of the story. We requested and we were told no, and we didn't go. But not for them. They got back on the radio and they basically insisted. They made it clear that if they didn't take action, we would be lost. And at that point, the leadership gave them permission to come in. They were dropped off, got me out of the aircraft. We ended up defending the crash site for, it's hard to say, maybe 10 minutes. And we were vastly outnumbered, and they were both gunned down and killed. And we were overrun, and I was captured.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing memory, man, I'm proud you're able to relate it on the show here today. And I look at the quality, the caliber of those guys, and you and the others who served there during Gothic Serpent, and that was, I mean, those were the elite of the elite with Delta, with the 160th, with the Rangers. Do you have? I look at it right now. My son's on active duty, and I know who he is. I know what his character is. I have no doubts about who he is. But I look at today's society, and I wonder: is our culture? Are we too soft, or do we still have the ability to raise up people like what you just described?
I think we have the ability. I'm just not sure we have it in the same quantity we had it before. I think it was easier to find and easier to cultivate. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It isn't just, the woke culture and everything else and where all those priorities are, but there's just a general disconnect from the military because, if you think about it, all the people that were around post-World War II where we were, 12 million force are gone. So people just don't understand the military, and people can't relate to the culture of the military as well as we could at one point. And, that's why I say, there's still people out there like that. I just don't think we have the volume of people we had before. And, it's very difficult. I just read some very troubling news in the last few days where there's some discussion about cutting the Special Operations Force by as much as 20%, and that would be catastrophic. I don't know where that's coming from or who thinks that's a good idea, but you cannot recreate that capability in anything short of years, if not decades. And we rely heavily on those forces today to prosecute missions all around the globe. 24/7. It's always going on, and to think that we're going to take an already stretched thin force and reduce the numbers is to me just incomprehensible, and I don't know who's pushing that, but I sure hope it doesn't happen.
No, and I agree with you. And what a lot of people don't realize is the majority of special operations, it's a second tier of their career. You don't usually have entry level. You do in some cases. You can join the Ranger Regiment, young in your career as an enlisted guy, but the majority of times, whether it be the guys from the SF or in the SEALs or flying with the 160th or whatever the case may be, you're having to come in having had experience already. So not only are you reducing a force that is effective, but you're reducing a level of seniority of experience that the force is not going to recoup quickly overall.
If ever, honestly. Once you lose something that's so difficult to create, it's almost impossible to get it back. And I just, I really hope that, cooler heads prevail and somebody can convince the decision makers that is not a good path forward.
Well, so
we said for decades it's people, not equipment. We've always said that, and it is. We need great equipment, no question about it, but it's second to people, and we got to stay the course on that, or we're going to be paying for it big time.
No, and I agree. In fact, I remember at some point during my mid-level career education process, I had to read General Wes Clark's a book on modern war. And the effort that was put into trying to create a sterile war that you could use guided missiles and create the entire fight, from afar, like, over the horizon kind of fight. It just, I don't think that's reality. I think our greatest asset is our people. And we don't have Memorial Day to talk about the missiles that we miss. We have Memorial Day to talk about the quality of the people that we miss.
100%. And just in case we don't get to it later, and it's not just the people, it's their families as well. That's the part that I think for me personally tugs at my heart the greatest, is knowing that there's a part of a family that's missing in every one of these stories that can never be replaced, and that's tough. It really is.
So Mike, let me ask you this: you first entered the service, enlisted in what, like 79, I think I said.
Yes.
Your situation in Mogadishu happened in 93. You were still mid-level of your career. You actually came back from that, though. Some people would have gotten out, but you didn't. You came back and served. You spent 21 and a half years active duty. 3,700 flight hours, according to what I'm looking at on this bio. Why'd you stay in uniform, and what drove you to return to the to pulling the stick and flying?
I loved it. I mean, the people that I served with, and I've seen this a lot actually. I talked to a lot of wounded warriors over the years, and almost without exception, they all wanted to go back to their unit because you feel this obligation to not let them down because they're not going to let you down. And I think that's a big driver in why I wanted to go back is, I got through this. I can still contribute. I can still be a part of the team. It's probably going to be in a different way, which it was. But, it's who I was. It was my identity. I related to that culture. I think it would have been a tragic mistake for me to get out, and I'm really glad I stayed in. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to, I've served a full career.
Well, I agree with that. So, listen, brother, in the last couple of minutes we have here to talk today, let me ask you this. If you were to be giving some advice to a young troop coming in, just talking to them about what to look for and what to be a part of, what would you say?
Well, I do talk to a lot of folks like that, and I encourage them to take advantage of every opportunity because there are tremendous opportunities in the military. I mean, using me as just one example, I could have never afforded to get flight qualified, and the military gave me an opportunity to go to flight school, and you have to work hard, you have to make good decisions, and you have to, be positive about it. But those opportunities are there, and probably always will be because people have to progress, from being an entry level soldier to whatever it is they want to be, and don't let those opportunities pass you by because there's no second chance on that. And I'd rather fail at something than never have ever given it a chance. And that's I think a lot of young people are maybe less willing to take risks where they may fail, and if that's the way a young person thinks, then they're probably never going to realize their full potential. They got to swing for the fence, and you won't always hit it, but when you do, it's going to feel really good.
Well, you've hit it a few times, brother. You've been successful in both the civilian and the military careers that you've had. Let me ask you this, final moments, any particular names? Obviously, we talked about Shugart and Gordon a minute ago, but anybody in particular you want to just honor by mentioning their name on the air today?
Well, it's everybody in Task Force Ranger, really. Certainly my crew, Ray Frank, Tommy Field, and Bill Cleveland, Cliff Walcott, Donovan Briley, the other 160th folks that lost their lives in that battle, and then everybody else that was there with us. God bless them and thank them for their sacrifices, and hope their families are doing well and have managed to carry on in the 30 years since that all happened.
Well, Mike Durant, thank you for your service, brother. Night Stalkers don't quit, right?
Night Stalkers don't quit, and Rangers lead the way.
Roger that. All right, you have a great day, sir. We'll talk to you again sometime soon.
All right, you too.
All right. Well, that was just cool. And listen, that's, by the way, that's a piece of aviation history, all right? In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Mike Durant has been inducted into the Aviators Hall of Fame. You're talking about a guy with a Distinguished Flying Cross and one of the few people to have earned the POW medal in recent history. And an amazing story. Movies and books have been written about it. And, it doesn't matter any of it if you don't have quality of character. And the idea that he's out there right now taking those experiences and putting them in places where people can gain from it is certainly something to be also given some measure of consideration. So anyway, we appreciate Mike Durant making time for us. We'll come right back from this break, kind of put a bow on some of this, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to keep texting in or if you want to call in and talk about somebody you remember, you are welcome to it. Got some great text messages going on. Coming up at the top of the hour, Stephanie Smith, Alabama Policy Institute. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Oh, man, I'm telling you, we've got some amazing text messages in here. Leanne from Huntsville says, great show. Thank you for honoring our military members. I want to remember my grandfather, Lawrence Smith, Army, and my dad, Leland Smith, Navy, USS Philippine Sea, both retired. Thank you, Leanne. We honor their service, too. Thank you very much. What else we got here? Brand spanking new in the text lines. We got a location, but not a name. First Sergeant Daniel Teets, U.S. Army, buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Came back from Afghanistan, was never the same. We need to. You need to have your name so you can tell us who you are. But we know you're a caller or a listener from Huntsville, so thank you very much. Allie from Athens just texted in and says, I want to remember Navy SEAL Mark Lee. He was the first Navy SEAL to perish in Iraq, and he died my first summer in Baghdad. Thank you, Allie. We appreciate it. Oh, and that last texter was remembering First Sergeant Daniel Teets is Dave from Huntsville. So, Dave, we're glad you're in the text string. We'll load you up in the system and keep on listening, brother. Badger from Athens says, Phil, read your Protect This House in the Athens Now yesterday. Awesome article. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And, my stuff gets printed regularly around the state, and Athens Now is actually owned by Allie from Athens, and so we're proud to be a part of her regular publications. Brian from Huntsville. I'm not seeing what it says here, so I'll get back to that one in a minute. But you got some other family members too.
Yeah,
You
I just like to honor them as well. My other grandfather, Hugh Wallace, was in the Navy.
Oh yeah, I knew him.
My uncles, James Hanks was in the Army for Vietnam.
Yeah,
and Hugh Campbell was in the Navy as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I knew 2 out of the 3.
Yes, you did.
How about that? That's something. I tell you what, I've been reading Medal of Honor citations or descriptions throughout the show, all from Alabama. How about this one? Howard Gilmore, born in Selma, Alabama, served as a commander of the submarine USS Growler patrolling the Southwest Pacific in 1943. Commander Gilmore sank one Japanese freighter, damaged another by torpedo fire, successfully evaded severe depth charges following each attack, and on the darkness of night on 7 February of 1943, an enemy gunboat closed range and prepared to ram the Growler. Commander Gilmore daringly maneuvered to avoid the crash, rammed the attacker instead, ripping into her port side at 17 knots and bursting her wide. It says, in the terrific fire of the sinking gunboat's heavy machine guns, Commander Gilmore calmly gave the order to clear the bridge and refused safety for himself. He remained on deck while his men preceded him below. He was struck down by a fusillade of bullets, having done his utmost against the enemy. In his final living moments, Commander Gilmore gave his last order to the officer of the deck, take her down. And the Growler dived, seriously damaged but under control, and was brought back safely to port, inspired by the courageous fighting spirit of their now dead captain. Howard Gilmore from Selma, Medal of Honor, Alabama. I had another one here. Where did it go? Oh, man, this one. William Lawley from Leeds. William Lawley from Leeds. On February 20th, 1944, he piloted a severely crippled B-17 back to England from a mission over Germany. He saved his 8 crew members. He was severely wounded. His co-pilot was dead. He was able to get the co-pilot off the controls and then, because of his injuries, could only steer the plane with one hand. Blood covered the instruments, the windshield visibility impossible. A full bomb load, the plane was difficult to maneuver. The bombs could not be released because their racks were frozen. The order to bail out had been given, but one of his waist gunners informed him that 2 of his crew members were so severely wounded they could not bail out. So with the fire and the engine spreading, he passed out multiple times due to loss of blood, but kept reawakening, pulling the plane out of a dive, and was able to bring it back and land it on a small airfield and save the rest of his crew, and was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. All right, folks, and these are all from Alabama, by the way. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll switch gears here in the next hour, do a little news roundup. Coming up next, our friend Stephanie Smith from API. We'll be right back.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios, man. The local, the state, the national, covering down on all the issues. And like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, it's been an amazing show. And by the way, if you want to keep texting in, 833-687-4448, we'll call out the names of those you want to remember, and we're proud to do it. So, yeah, 833-687-4448. Brand new in the text lines, Dante from Decatur. Dante, we're glad you're in the system. Says, in memory of my uncles, Second Lieutenant Harry Pettit, Jr., 447th Bomb Group, kindled in action February 28th, 1944. And PFC Raymond Clyde Pettit, 187th Regimental Combat Team, killed in action 1951 in Korea. So thank you for their service, man. We appreciate that, Dante. Scott from Decatur, I want to remember David T. Hamilton, Spec 5, earned a Bronze Star in Vietnam. We got it, Scott. Thank you very much. And then Bryant from Huntsville. Bryant says, want to honor my Uncle Howard. He was a Marine, and my grandfather was a navigator for the Air Force. Thank you, Senator Williams, says, for your service, for your show today, honoring veterans. We appreciate it, Bryant. Hey, listen, we're going to switch gears. We're going to do some news because I'm going to tell you right now, it has been a target-rich environment this week in Montgomery, and really, there's been things that have been happening on a national level. So our friend Stephanie Smith is on the line right now. She's the president of the Alabama Policy Institute, neck deep in things that have been happening, some of which we saw coming, and some of which were like, what just happened in the past week in Montgomery? Stephanie Smith, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Phil. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, before we kick off, too, we've been talking Memorial Day and honoring those that we love or knew or think of on Memorial Day. Anybody you want to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been listening, and the segment with Mike Durant was really powerful. I got a chance to meet him during the election season and have a lot of respect for his service and all of the men and women, who have sacrificed both their lives and also those who have sacrificed, alongside them, family members and, people who love them, especially those who have been lost and sacrificed to our country. I don't think that we honor them enough. Mm-hmm. On a personal level, both of my grandfathers served. Well, one of my grandfathers served in the South Pacific, and he's passed away about 10 years ago. His name was W.C. Holden. And then my other grandfather, my maternal grandfather, passed away not of COVID, but during COVID, and he started serving in the Navy and then in the Coast Guard just after the war was over. And so he was a stalwart in my life, and we lost him, like I said, during COVID, but not of COVID. And he's the veteran in my life that was most significant, for sure.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning both of them, and thank you for their service, my friend. So, well, listen, let's switch gears. What the heck? I mean, I saw things come out this week in Montgomery, and I'm like, okay, first of all, it looks like we might get a grocery tax cut because the House did some stuff, and then now we might also give a loan to a private college because they can't manage their money on their own, so they need the government to bail them out. Sure. And then we might have gambling, or we might not. What? Give us the roundup, girl. What have you seen? What have you heard?
Yeah, it was a bit of a roller coaster this week. It gets that way, as you know. At the end of the session, some weird things start to happen. They stay up all night. Everybody gets what I would call a little chippy. But at the beginning of the week, we really understood that it was going to be budget week. They were going to hash through the budget. As you know, most of your listeners know because they're learned because they listen to you. The budgets are really the only thing that has to be passed. Both of the sets of budgets. And so it was budget week. And so I went down there to testify on behalf of the grocery tax cut because API has been pushing for that tax cut since way before I was affiliated with API. And I've been discussing the grocery tax and the possibility of cutting that tax just because it's a regressive tax and something that impacts all of the state, everybody in the state for years. So I went down to testify on behalf of that tax cut. And the day that I went down there to testify, the Senate budget committees decided not to meet at all this week because they wanted to see what the House was going to do. Also, they decided that if the grocery tax cut went through, they were going to put basically all of the tax credits, or the vast majority of the tax credits, and other tax cut proposals in the trash can. That wasn't necessary.
No, it wasn't.
As you all know, there's a huge surplus in both of the budgets. It wasn't necessary to do that, but they decided that they wanted to spend the other portion of the money and give us rebate checks that Governor Ivey had promised in her state of the state, instead of long-term tax cuts that would be a permanent fix and a permanent help to all of our citizens.
Well, I mean, I look at that, and so the rebate checks you're talking about, the governor originally wanted to give everybody $400 or $800 for a couple. It's now been whittled down to what, $150 for an individual or $300 for a couple.
That's right.
And that passed out of which body? Which body had that so far? The House or the Senate?
So it's actually in process in both.
Okay.
But now it's passed.
That's right. They did pass that one.
Yes, they did. That was one of the negotiations in the wee hours of the morning. So the whittled down rebate, is kind of a done deal at this point. I think that was a negotiation with the governor's office. I think that the legislature, once they got into session, really wanted to do a few of these tax cuts, which I give them credit for. They were trying to move toward tax cuts, and then they were pulled back toward the rebates because of what she had said publicly, which is unfortunate because it won't be noticed by the people who get them, and it won't. To me, it's not politically smart because it doesn't give you bang for a buck, and it also really just doesn't help people down the road.
No.
That money could have been better spent elsewhere.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I don't want to poo-poo the idea that $150 won't mean something, but what that really does is it buys you about 5 pizzas, and that's
right.
and that's just not a significant level of tax relief. But all right, so but to touch base then again on the grocery tax, which feels like a victory in the brewing. We are looking at the House did pass it, and they're cutting the grocery tax in half over the next 2 years. So 2 cents on the dollar less you have to spend for milk, bread, and eggs and everything else.
Right. And, the grocery tax, like I said, has been something that's been talked about for 25 plus years.
Yeah.
We're one of only 3 states that levies a state tax on groceries, full tax on necessities. And it's one of those things that just really needs to go. If you and I had written it, it would have been rip the Band-Aid off, take that 4% off, and be done with it. During the negotiation process, it was clear that was not going to happen without making it up on the other side. And the decision was made, let's do it incrementally and get rid of it as we go without replacing it with some other sort of new tax or new revenue. And that was the decision. And I think that's a victory. I like the idea that if there is a surplus, the attitude is how do we get a surplus back to the people? So I don't completely reject the rebate idea because it does have that idea of, hey, we've got extra money and this isn't ours. I like that concept.
Yeah.
I just don't think it went far enough. Yeah,
because I've said many times on this show, if government winds up with a surplus, it means they, on one hand, they just took more of your money than they needed. And so,
absolutely.
give it
and
back.
Do keep in mind, too, that it's a surplus on top of the addition from last year's budget, which was the largest budget ever, and that was on top of the year before, which was the largest budget ever. So the surplus is on top of the growth. So it's not even like, oh, we're cutting everything 10% and then we're going to have money left over. It's an increase over last year, and then they still have a surplus. And so the attitude should be, hey, we took too much of y'all's money, and we're going to send this back. And that's the attitude of a rebate, which is good. But you really are sending the money back to the people when you give the people their money in the first place. You don't take as much of it from the first place.
All right, so let me do this. I tell you what, Stephanie, we normally talk one segment, but there's several more bills I want to discuss. Can you hang on through a break and we'll come back and do a little more?
Oh, sure.
Well, let's do that.
Absolutely.
Let's do that. We'll take a break right now. We'll be back in just a couple minutes with Stephanie Smith from the Alabama Policy Institute, because you may want to hear that apparently a gambling bill showed up this week, and then on top of that, What is going on with Birmingham Southern getting a loan with tax dollars? We'll talk about it. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right, where common sense is a superpower. I got a brand new texter in the line, and we need to get your name and where you're from. Well, actually, I take it back. Sergeant Major retired, and we'll just use initials here, DM Davis. So anyway, remembering Team 3 Alpha, LERP, Task Force 3rd Brigade, 25th ID, all KIA, Vietnam, 1967. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Appreciate your service too, by the way. And LERPs, I have an affiliation as a platoon leader. I was in LERS, which is the modern equivalent for recon. And thank you for your service, Sergeant Major. Going back to the phones right now, our friend Stephanie Smith for the Alabama Policy Institute just spent the week monitoring and interacting with the shenanigans going on down yonder on the Goat Hill in Montgomery. And hey, Stephanie, let me ask you this. Out of the blue, a gambling bill showed up. What the heck?
Yeah, there were a series of articles that were written last week, or about a week and a half ago now, that were like, hey, no gambling bills this session, fantastic. And then literally the next day, Bobby Singleton, a state senator, dropped a local gambling bill for Greene County. The trouble is, and you picked up on the key word because you were a state senator, which is, so he dropped a local bill, a local constitutional amendment to alter the definition of pari-mutuel betting for the county of Greene County. And the problem with that is that the way the legislature works is that local legislation is kind of hands-off. And so most other senators won't vote against someone else's local legislation because the idea, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is, you know, for local control of that delegation to make the decisions for their area, and that, you know, somebody from Coleman shouldn't, you know, be able to vote on what's happening in the city of Mobile or vice versa. And so he presented this as a piece of local legislation, but it does change the definition of pari-mutuel betting to basically be slot machines. Anything that they want. And so
Bobby Singleton kills me.
Yeah, and he's a friend. I mean, he's a character and he's a friend, but it's one of those. So he dropped it the next day. It was in tourism committee, had a public hearing. They voted on it same day as the public hearing, which, as you know, is not particularly customary. And then so it came out of committee, and then the next morning was considered as a piece of local legislation on the Senate floor.
Well, did it pass?
It passed.
God almighty.
Yes.
I mean, that's not the kind of bill that's supposed to creep in the dark of night. That's the kind of thing that's supposed to have some time and energy attached to the vigorous debate, and that's not what happened there. Masking it as a local bill, I'm not sure that would stand up to a legal challenge, but even still, wow.
Right.
Wow.
Well, and it was one of those things that was pretty frustrating because it happened so quickly, which obviously was the strategy. It happened so quickly that most of the senators, and especially the new guys who are, you know, down there for the first time, didn't really know, you know, that there was a chance that a piece of local legislation could have statewide implications like that and would have such a bad mark on their record. And so I reached out to all the new guys, and then, you know, the ones who typically vote against gambling legislation to make sure that they knew ahead of time. Because, as you know, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll come in early in the morning, and the first thing that they'll take up before, you know, as soon as they get a quorum, the first thing they'll take up is these, quote, uncontested local bills, because they just fly through, and they use the original roll of, like, hey, who's here to do it, and then they use the previous roll for the next one and the next one and the next one, because they are truly uncontested local bills. The problem is this one was presented that way, but it expanded gambling and gave unlimited slot machines to the county, to Greene County. And it's a constitutional amendment, so if it passes, there's nothing that the governor can do, though I don't know that she would stop it anyway. And then it's a constitutional amendment on the ballot.
That's madness. Well, all right, more to come on that one. In the couple of minutes we have left, though, let's talk real quick about Birmingham Southern being what is now known as a distressed private college.
That's right.
And a bill was passed basically because of Birmingham Southern, but it's designed to be generically addressed as the distressed private or public universities loan program or something. So basically public tax dollars
Right.
being used to bail out with a low interest loan any college who's gotten in trouble. What are your thoughts?
Yes, and so the way it's structured is it's through the treasurer's office. So the treasurer has basically become, the state banker and state lender for any distressed institution. They tried to tighten up the language, the definitions to make sure it was specific and wouldn't apply to, a fly-by-night kind of situation. It's an institution that, has to have been around for 50 years or more, and et cetera, et cetera. But the problem for me on that is just the concept that if you are making poor financial decisions, even if you're a private, school, and you're making poor financial decisions, and frankly, poor political decisions, because I think that's been part of a factor in their demise.
Yeah.
You don't need to look to your alums. You don't need to look to private foundations or organizations to bail you out. You just go to the straight treasurer because he's going to be your lender. And I have a real problem with using taxpayer dollars for that purpose.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you too, I would love to maybe get your guy, your fiscal analyst Justin Bogey, on next week and maybe break that down even further,
Sure.
because I think that's a topic that we have to. I mean, I don't like the whole too big to fail thing, which is what was being played here, and I definitely don't like the idea that we are going to be the. And by the way, where does it stop? And it didn't just say private schools; it could be public. So they're already on the appropriations for the budget, and then they can come in and go, by the way, we're distressed now. What's the qualification list? So.
Right. Well, and the trouble with me as well is that it's personal loyalties. State senators and representatives standing up and saying, "My grandfather graduated from Birmingham." Whatever. It's public money being used for personal loyalties,
yes.
and I think that's wrong.
I agree. All right, hey, my friend, that wraps up our time. Thanks for hanging on for a full half hour, and thanks for what you're doing down in Montgomery. If they want to find out more about you, where do they go?
You can find us at alabamapolicy.org.
All right. Thank you. Stephanie Smith, have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Good timing. We'll call a wrap on that one. We'll come right back. Spend a little time on what would have been number 2 of the Triple Dipper, and we'll go ahead and make it number 2 now. We just kind of did the news roundup first. Now we're going to go to Military Minded. We come back, I got a few pieces to kind of take us into the Memorial Day weekend. If you want to text in 833-68-RIGHT, or call in for that matter. Who do you want to honor? We'd be glad to hear their names. All right, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Be right back. And we're back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right, covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. That would be Alabama. I'm talking about this show goes way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. So new text line, got Dennis from Athens just texting in, says wanted to honor his dad, Johnny Marshall, United States Navy, and his uncles, David Marshall, U.S. Navy, Frank Toon, U.S. Air Force, and John Toon, U.S. Navy. So there you go. Dennis, we're glad you're in the text lines with us, so thank you very much. And by the way, I just saw Sergeant Major DM Davis asked me about the LERS Association. I had not seen that text before, and I apologize. But yeah, I tell you what, Sergeant Major, I appreciate it. I will take a look at that and just realize that text was there. I apologize for not seeing it before. All right. Mike from Muscle Shoals says, shockingly, Billy Ray Cyrus has a great song called "Some Gave All." That's interesting. I don't know that song. Do you, Boom? That's good. And Keith Urban has got a great one too. Oh gosh, I just forgot the name of it. And it's at the end. It's the outgoing theme from the Navy SEAL movie, Act of Valor. That was a good movie. It was not a good acting movie at all, but it was a great action movie. I mean, because they were all active duty Navy. None of them were actors. So they all seemed like they were not actors. But then again, they were all operators, and they seemed like they were operators. So there's that. Hey, by the way, before I go any further, I got to tell you, ZLA Solutions, as you head into the weekend, just know this, ZLA Solutions is doing epic cool work right now at lining up people and jobs. So if you're an employer and you need people, well, guess what? ZLA Solutions is on top of it. It's their bread and butter, man. They do all kinds of things for businesses, but they can help you quite a bit with finding people. So if you need, for instance, onesies and twosies with special niche kind of skills, or you need an entire shift of people, it can be in the service industry, in the automotive industry. They can put people in your factories. They cover all of it. I like to say blue collar, white collar, no collar, it don't matter. They got a hiring push on right now for a major high-tech position, bunch of positions at Redstone Arsenal. Check them out, ZLA Solutions. They're good at what they do, and they can find people for you. ZLA Solutions at ZLAUSA.com. That's ZLA Solutions at ZLAUSA.com. Brian from Decatur wants to honor his grandfather, Frank Presta, says Army. He liberated Italy and served in the rebuild of Italy. Hey, that's very cool. Brian, thank you very much for letting us know. You want to text in or call in for the next few minutes here. The number is 833-687-4448. Had some great, just looking back over the show, this is one of those that, man, if you miss part of it, you want to pick it up. So for those of you that are like in the car heading home for the long weekend, let me just tell you what you may have missed if you didn't hear it all. Started off with my monologue. It was called Always Remember, Never Forget. And then at 2:30, my interpreter from Afghanistan, Hamid, called in, and we spent some time talking. And I tell you what, it was moving to hear somebody who grew up in an era in another country where there was no freedom to now be a U.S. citizen after serving with U.S. troops and knowing what freedom really means. That was at 2:30 today. Then at 3 o'clock, we had Major General Joe Arbuckle, who called in, and we talked about his experiences, his 30 years of service, and the experiences he had and the bonds you form, including his time in Vietnam. And then at 3:30, we had Alabama's own Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mike Durant, who became famous as the guy who piloted Super 6-4, the Black Hawk that was shot down, one of the Black Hawks shot down over the Battle of Mogadishu. So yeah, Mike Durant was on at 3:30. And then we just talked politics and things that are happening in Montgomery with our friend Stephanie Smith. And I'm just going to tell you, it's been a major, major show. What are you thinking?
Well, actually, I wanted you to mention one more thing.
Yeah.
And the resources on our show, there's this one article about so many different military members.
Oh, the Medal of Honor winners?
Yes, in Alabama. And it's in our resources for the show. If anybody else wants to see it, go to our website and check it out.
Perfect. Yeah. So Boom does a great job. Every morning when I'm getting the resources together, I send them over to him. He puts them in a format where I can then print them out, highlight them, mark them up, all that kind of stuff. But what we started doing, about a month ago, I guess?
Yeah, about a month.
Yeah, about a month. So if you go to our website, rightsideradio.org, there's a tab on there that says live stream. Go on that tab of the website. You can watch inside the studio while we're on the air. You can pick up the live audio in case all you want is audio while you're driving and you're outside of our overly broad range of AM, FM. But there's also a button that says resources. So every day when the Triple Dipper is on there, you hear me rattling paper. And that's because I've got a series of articles that go with that Triple Dipper. They're all now available for you. And one of them, Boomer's talking about, is a piece that I pulled up and I've been using for the show today. Alabama's had 33 Medal of Honor recipients. And I've been reading out some of them. And they're amazing. And that whole list of all 33 is available for you if you want to see it. Let me go find another one right now, just to go ahead and pull it, because there was one I just saw a moment ago that's, okay, so Henry Eugene, nickname was Red Irwin, died in 2002, but he was a radio operator on a B-29 bomber in World War II. On April 12, 1945, Staff Sergeant Irwin was in the lead plane on a mission to Japan. 25 miles from the target, under fire, a flare was dropped inside the plane. It was basically a phosphorescence flare of some type. And the burning phosphorescence immediately, it says, obliterated his nose, completely blinded him. Smoke began to fill up the plane, obscuring the vision of the pilot. Staff Sergeant Irwin, though, realized the aircraft and crew could be lost if the burning phosphorescence bomb remained in the plane. So without regard for his own safety, he actually picked it up, felt his way up to the front instinctively, crawled around in the gun turret, found the co-pilot's window, and the medal citation says that groping with his burning hands, he found the window and threw the bomb out. Completely aflame, he fell back on the floor, suffered amazing burns. I saw a picture of him. He was one of those who you can tell very easily that he's been burned severely. The smoke cleared. The pilot at 300 feet was able to pull the plane out of its dive, and his gallantry and heroism above and beyond the call of duty saved the lives of his comrades, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor. That's amazing. Carrying a burning white phosphorus a grenade or flare or something up to the front of the plane to get it out the window. That's just amazing. I got to tell you what, did I do Lolly? I did Lolly. Let me find another one here. Robert Howard I did, the most decorated man from the entire Vietnam War. My gosh. And then there was one that I was going to bring up too. Holy cow. I mean, there's 33 of them. Charles Thomas from Birmingham. Charles Thomas was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his service in World War II in France. He was riding in the lead vehicle of a task force organized to storm and capture the village of Klimbach in France. His armored scout car was subjected to intense enemy artillery and self-propelled gunfire and small arms fire, and although wounded by the initial burst of hostile fire, it says Lieutenant Thomas signaled the remainder of the column to halt, and despite the severity of his wounds, he assisted the crew of the wrecked car dismounting. He got his men out. Then, leaving scant protection of the vehicle behind, he was subjected to a hail of enemy fire, which inflicted multiple gunshot wounds to his chest, legs, and arms. But despite the intense pain, he continued to order and direct the dispersion and emplacement of 2 anti-tank guns, which were then promptly and effectively, it says, used to return enemy fire. And then it says, realizing he could no longer remain in command of his platoon, he finally signaled another platoon commander to join him. And then he thoroughly oriented that man on the enemy gun positions, gave him the general situation, and after that, he was evacuated. But he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously for his incredible actions under enemy fire. Here's the interesting thing about Charles Thomas. He was also black. And this was at a time when the Army was still segregated. And so a man who was seen as being someone who can't join the general ranks of the Army was in a black-only unit. And look at what he did. And I'm just thankful that he was actually awarded the Medal of Honor. And that's amazing. These are all folks from Alabama. And they're all in the resources. So go check them out. By the way, before we go to the break, let me just tell you this. You hear during the breaks, you hear the advertising that we do, right? You hear the different ads playing. Just know this. Rightside Radio, if you like what we stand for, if you like what we've done even today, honoring veterans and those who've gone before us and given their lives for this country, well, then just know this. We're a standalone business. And we sustain our operations in a variety of ways. We're a 501c3, but we also, by the way, sell ads. And the only way you can do that is to call us. You can't call the station because we're on multiple stations. We're not owned by them. We are a standalone business that sends them our show. So if you want to advertise with Rightside Radio, you got to contact us. Go to our website, rightsideradio.org, and you can just click on the advertising and contact sheet or tab and send us a message, and we'll get right back in touch with you. We'd love to have you on the team. If our values and your values align, man, let's do some business. All right, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Well, listen, several texts and all going on in there, and I'm going to get to them here in just 1 minute, and a couple more of these opportunities to discuss Medal of Honor winners from our state. Let me just first, though, tell you, other folks doing good things like the ELM Foundation. And I just love the fact that we've got somebody partnering with us, the ELM Foundation, ELM. It stands for Expect Little Miracles. And the ELM Foundation is out there making a difference in people's lives in the streets of Huntsville, finding folks who need a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up, and helping them to restore their self-worth and finding the ability to become productive again and to get job skills qualifications. And basically, though, they don't just throw money at it like the government might do. They actually walk them through a program, give them milestones and accountability, and it works. And so check them out. Their website is ELMHSV, as in Elm Huntsville, ELMHSV.org. That's elmhsv.org. And if you do talk to them, tell them you heard about it on Rightside Radio. I would appreciate it. So several things here. Let me jump over to some text line stuff. What do we got here? Brand new texter, Captain Steve from Harvest says, Captain Steve says, I'd like to recognize my late father, Master Sergeant Billy A. Kilpatrick, U.S. Air Force, retired, for his service and life lessons that he taught me. Yep, so that's Captain as in Navy Captain Steve from Harvest, Alabama. Appreciate your service too, sir, and thank you very much. Drew from Huntsville, I'd love to honor my grandfather, O.A. Buddy Tinneman. He said he served in the Navy during World War II, became an engineer, lived to be 94 years old, had an amazing life, giving back in terms of sacrifices he had made for our great country. So, all right, Drew, Huntsville, thank you, brother. Appreciate your grandfather's service. Thank you for recognizing him. Tony from Piedmont points out, and I've talked about it on here before. I didn't mention it today, though, but, the movie Hacksaw Ridge, great movie. Hacksaw Ridge was about Desmond Doss. And Desmond Doss, Medal of Honor winner, a conscientious objector who won the Medal of Honor in the Pacific. He was from Piedmont, Alabama. Wasn't born here, but he spent most of his life in Piedmont, Alabama, and died there not so long ago, actually. And yeah, Highway 9 between Piedmont and Center, Tony points out, is named after Desmond Doss. Ron in Madison just joined the text strings. You got a brand new one to put in again, Boomer. Ron in Madison, I want to honor my dad, Robert Tibbetts, who served in the Navy World War II in the South Seas. Also, my great uncle, Ed Keck, World War I Army, served in France. There you go. Thank you, brother. Teresa from Town Creek says, thank you to all our military who have served and sacrificed for our country. Thank you, Teresa. Another new texter, Sergeant John, and I don't have a location of where you live, and I'll be honest with you, John, I can't read. It's a very, very long text. He says, I want to honor my best friend, David Euler. He served active duty Navy before I met him. He moved here from Oklahoma. They spent time in the Guard together. He was in the 1st or the 2nd, 203rd Bravo Battery Patriot Missile Air Defense System. And anyway, he said his friend went to Iraq, or actually I take it back, a few years later, he went to Iraq, but our texter was not able to go with him at that time. Anyway, he talks about him like only a friend could talk about somebody. And he says, I was and still am honored to say Sergeant David Euler was my best friend until we meet again. All right, man, that's good stuff. Brian from Decatur, and I agree with you, Brian. Thank you for saying this. He says, don't forget the military wives. Well, military wives, spouses in general, but military wives, my wife being one, who can hold the fort down and make things happen like nobody else can. So, John, who just texted in a minute ago, Sergeant John, that's John from Madison. So we'll plug that in. Thank you, John. And then I got to go back. Allie from Athens just pointed something out. I had totally forgotten this. I had heard it, but it was like a back of the mind kind of thing, and I'd forgotten. So a minute ago, I talked about Medal of Honor winner. His nickname was Red Irwin, Henry Eugene Red Irwin, who, if you remember, he's a story I told you about the guy who was a navigator, a communications officer, a sergeant on B-29 bomber during World War II. And the white phosphorus flare got loose inside the plane. And in order to save the plane, he carried that burning thing, found a window, even though he's blinded, and it burned off part of his face, and was able to get it out of a window, save the plane. Well, if you're familiar with the Christian movies being made by the Irwin brothers, movies like I Can Only Imagine, well, the Irwin brothers, that's their grandfather. And that's, first of all, very cool. Secondly, they honor his legacy because the logo of the Irwin Brothers studio that makes all these great Christian movies is their grandfather's B-29, which was, I think it was named the City of Los Angeles. Yeah, the City of Los Angeles. Very cool. I went to their website just now, Allie. Thank you for reminding me of that. And they actually have a video where they honor their grandfather and talk about his legacy. It's called The Legacy Behind the Logo. Great little short video, certainly worth seeing. But there it is, and they show his B-29, they show his Medal of Honor, and how cool is that, right here from Alabama. I think, if I'm not mistaken, too, Red Irwin was the father of former Republican State Senator Hank Irwin, who served for many years in the Alabama legislature. So, yeah, well, I mean, listen, Alabama, we've got it going on. 33 Medal of Honor winners. They're on the resources if you want to see them. No way I could name them all. Some of whom I've had a chance to know personally, like Colonel Ola Lee Mize, who before I left for Afghanistan came to see me and just gave me a few words that stuck with me and still to this day stick with me about what it means to take care of your men in harm's way. And I'll never forget that. In fact, I have the honor of, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be the MC for an opportunity to lay a new stone at Colonel Mize's graveside, and be there with a number of dignitaries and his wife, and honor him as somebody who meant so much to our community. All right, folks, listen, it is a Memorial Day weekend, and this was a show that was designed to honor veterans and to distinctively and always remember and never forget. To always remember means it's in the back of your mind, but you're going to pull it forward. You're going to remember it. But to never forget means you're going to be intentional about memorializing it and make sure it stays in place and that it can't be lost to future generations. Our own memories pass with us. We have to make sure that the next round of people who are coming along recognize what has already happened before them. So thank you to all of you who have served, and thank you to all of you who spent time over this show sending in those names you wanted recognized. And listen, it is a big part of why we do this show. You know, this show has to go on. I mean, I love doing what I do. I love being here to do things like bring honor. And folks, it's pretty easy because I got an audience like y'all. Anyway, enjoyed being with you. You guys have an amazing weekend. And remember those who went before you, because freedom is not free. We'll see you at. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.